The spring of 1876 came to Wyoming territory with a vengeance. Snow from the high country melted too fast, turning the Sweetwater River into a brown, churning beast that clawed at its banks and swallowed anything fool enough to test it. Matthew Cole stood on the ridge above his cabin, watching the water rise with the detached interest of a man who'd seen worse things than nature's tantrums. He was 32 that spring, though his eyes carried more years. The war had done that aged a man from the inside out. His hands, scarred from rope and rifle, hung loose at his sides as he calculated how many more feet the river could climb before it threatened his cabin. 2, maybe 3. He'd built high enough, or so he hoped. The wind carried the scent of pine and mud, and something else, the metallic tang that came before more rain. Matt tugged his worn coat closer. The Union blue had long since faded to gray, brass buttons replaced with bone. Some things a man kept, even when he'd rather forget why. He turned toward his cabin, a modest structure of lodgepole pine that had taken him 3 months to build. Inside waited coffee, beans, and silence, his 3 most reliable companions since coming to this bend of the river 2 years back. Red Bluff, the nearest town, lay 8 miles east, and Matt made the trip only when supplies ran low or when the weight of solitude pressed too heavy on his chest. The first crack came sharp as a rifle shot. Matt spun toward the river in time to see a massive cottonwood upstream give way, its roots torn free by the current. The tree rolled like a dying buffalo, branches thrashing, before the river claimed it whole. Then he heard a sound that didn't belong to water or wind or breaking wood. A human cry, high and desperate, threading through the roar. Matt's body moved before his mind caught up. Old instincts firing like they had at Antietam, at Chancellorsville, at too many other places where hesitation meant death. He ran toward the river, boots sliding on the muddy slope, eyes scanning the churning brown surface. There, caught in the tangle of branches where an old willow had fallen half into the water, a flash of dark fabric, an arm raised, fingers grasping at air. "Hold on!" His voice got swallowed by the river's roar, but he yelled it anyway, already stripping off his coat and gun belt. The water hit him like a frozen hammer when he plunged in, current immediately seizing him with greedy hands. Swimming wasn't the right word for what Matt did. It was more like controlled drowning, using the current when he could, fighting it when he had to. His boots felt like anvils. Should have taken them off, but no time for should-haves now. The person, a woman, he could see now, had stopped moving, her body limp in the branch's embrace. Matt grabbed for her and missed, the current spinning him past. He clawed his way back, lungs burning, and managed to hook an arm around her waist. "Got you," he gasped, though she couldn't hear him. Getting her free took precious seconds he didn't have. Her dress had tangled in the branches, the fabric wound tight. Matt pulled his knife, sawing at the cloth while the river tried to tear them both away. When the fabric finally gave, they shot downstream like corks from a bottle. Matt had learned long ago that fighting a river was like fighting the war you couldn't win by strength alone. You had to think, to use what the enemy gave you. He spotted a gravel bar downstream, the current setting toward it, and spent his strength angling them into the shallows. They hit the bar hard, Matt taking the brunt on his shoulder. He dragged the woman clear of the current, both of them gasping like landed fish. She was alive, coughing up river water, eyes unfocused but open. "Easy," Matt said, supporting her as she retched. "Get it out!" When the worst passed, he got his first real look at her. Young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair plastered to her skull. Her dress, what remained of it, had once been decent brown wool. A canvas bag was tied to her wrist with rope, the knots swollen tight with water. But it was the bruise on her cheek that made Matt's jaw tighten. Fresh purple-green, maybe 2 days old, the kind of mark a fist left. Her eyes found his amber-colored, like good whiskey or autumn honey. "Please," she whispered, voice raw. "Don't take me to town." It was an odd first request from someone just pulled from death's door. But Matt had learned not to question desperation. He'd felt enough of it himself. "All right," he said, "but we need to get you warm. My cabin's just up the ridge." She tried to stand and collapsed immediately. Without asking permission, the cold would kill her faster than any impropriety. Matt scooped her up. She weighed less than she should. Bird bones and determination. The climb to the cabin tested muscles already spent from the river. Matt's shoulders screamed where he'd hit the gravel, and his boots squelched with every step. The woman shivered against him, mumbling something he couldn't catch. Inside the cabin, he set her in the chair nearest the stove and stirred the banked coals to life. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, wool blanket from the chest, coffee pot on the heat, dry clothes from his meager store. He set a flannel shirt and wool trousers on the table. "These'll be too big, but they're dry. I'll step outside." Her hand caught his sleeve as he turned. "Why? Why what? Why save me?" Those amber eyes held his, genuinely puzzled. "You don't know me." Matt considered the question. Could have said something about Christian duty or basic decency, but those felt like lies he'd tell in town. The truth was simpler and more complex. "Heard someone needed help? Rest don't matter." He stepped outside before she could respond, giving her privacy to change. The rain had started. Fat drops that promised a long, cold night. From inside came the sounds of movement, a soft gasp of pain. When enough time had passed, he knocked. "Come in." She sat wrapped in the blanket, his clothes hanging loose on her frame. The canvas bag lay on the table, still tied to her wrist. She'd tried to finger-comb her hair, revealing a face that would be pretty when the bruise faded and the river pallor left. Matt poured coffee, added a splash from his whiskey bottle without asking. She took it with both hands, breathing the steam. "I'm Matthew Cole," he said, settling into the opposite chair. "Matt." "Lila," she paused, seemed to weigh the risk of more truth. "Lila Hart." The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it, like throwing down a playing card and waiting to see if it got trumped, told him it meant something in Red Bluff. "Well, Mrs. Hart, you're welcome to stay until the river calms. Day or two, most likely. How did you know I was married?" He nodded at her hand. "Tan line where a ring was. Recent, from the look." Her fingers curled involuntarily. I'm a widow." The word hung between them, heavy with unspoken story. Matt didn't push. In his experience, people told you what they wanted you to know when they were ready. Pushing just made them lie. They sat in companionable silence while the coffee worked its warmth into their bones. The rain picked up, drumming on the roof. Lila's eyes grew heavy, exhaustion winning over wariness. "You can have the bed," Matt said. "I'll take the floor." "I couldn't." "You could and will, no argument." She was too tired to fight it. Matt helped her to the narrow bed, noted how she favored her left side ribs. Maybe, or just general battering from the river. When she was settled, he built up the fire and pulled his bedroll near the stove. "Mr. Cole," her voice came soft in the darkness. Matt, that bag, could you cut it loose? My knife's somewhere in the river." He found his knife, still damp from cutting her dress free, and saved through the swollen rope. The bag was heavier than it looked. Lila tucked it against her side like a child with a favored toy. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not asking. Get some rest." But sleep came slow for Matt. He lay listening to the rain and the river's distant roar, thinking about bruises and tan lines and the kind of fear that made a woman choose drowning over town. The war had taught him to recognize desperation in all its forms. Lila Hart wore hers like a second skin. Sometime near dawn, she cried out in her sleep. Matt sat up, hand reaching for a gun that wasn't there, before remembering where he was. Lila thrashed in the bed, caught in some nightmare the river hadn't washed away. "Just a dream," he said quietly, not touching her but letting his voice carry across the dark. You're safe." She stilled, breathing hard. After a moment, "Sorry." "Nothing to be sorry for. Do you get them nightmares?" Matt could have lied, but something about the darkness and the rain made truth easier. "Sometimes. Less than I used to." "Does it get better?" "Different. Not sure better's the right word." She made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "Honest, at least. Go back to sleep. Sun'll be up soon." But he doubted either of them would sleep again that night. The rain kept on, and somewhere out there the Sweetwater River ran wild and hungry, carrying away whatever secrets it had almost claimed. In the morning, Matt would learn more about why Lila Hart feared Red Bluff more than drowning. He'd learn about debts and threats, and the kind of justice that wore a badge but answered to money. But for now, in the dark of his cabin with the rain beating down, he simply kept watch over a stranger who'd needed saving, and wondered if he'd just complicated his carefully simple life beyond repair. The coffee pot whispered on the stove. Outside, the river sang its ancient song of change and chances, and Matthew Cole, who'd come to Wyoming territory to escape his past, felt the first stirrings of a future he hadn't planned for and wasn't sure he wanted. But wanting and needing were different things, as any soldier could tell you. Sometimes life handed you a duty you didn't ask for, and you could either turn away or stand up to meet it. Matt had never been much good at turning away. Morning came reluctantly to the valley, filtered through clouds that promised more rain. Matt woke to find Lila already up, standing by the window with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the swollen river below. "Coffee's cold," she said without turning. "I didn't want to wake you by stoking the fire." "Been awake since 4. Matt rose, joints protesting from his night on the floor. "Just been lying here thinking." "About what?" "Whether that river's going to take my chicken coop. Built it too close to the bank." She turned then, and he saw she'd tried to do something with her hair, braiding it wet. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, purple spreading into yellow at the edges. "You have chickens." "Had. Coyote got them last month. Keep meaning to get more." He busied himself with the stove, feeding it kindling. "How are the ribs?" Her hand went unconsciously to her left side. "How did you never mind? Sore, but not broken. I've had broken before." The way she said it, matter of fact as commenting on weather, made Matt pause in his fire building. But he'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing was to let hard truths pass without remark. "I should go," Lila said. "You've done enough." "Go where river won't be safe to cross for days, and the bridge at Red Bluff is likely washed out." He straightened, dusting his hands. "Besides, you pay for your keep around here." "With what?" A bitter smile touched her lips. "Whatever's in that bag isn't mine to give." "Wasn't thinking of money. That garden patch out back is more weeds than vegetables. You pull weeds while you're here. We'll call it square." She studied him like she was trying to read small print in bad light. "Why would you trust me in your garden? You don't know anything about me. No, you didn't give up in that river. No, you said please and thank you. Rest I can figure out as we go." Matt set the coffee pot on the heating stove. "Now, you staying for breakfast or not?" Something in her shoulders eased, tension running out like water. "I can cook, if you'll let me." Matt gestured to his meager supplies: cornmeal, beans, salt pork, dried apples. "Make whatever you can from that, and I'll call it a feast." While Lila worked at the stove, Matt stepped outside to check his property. The river had risen another foot overnight but seemed to be holding steady. His theoretical chicken coop remained above water, though barely. The small vegetable garden was a mud pit, but the roots would hold. When he returned, the cabin smelled like heaven, or at least like hot cornbread and fried pork. Lila had found his cache of wild onions and worked some kind of magic with the beans. She moved around his small kitchen with the efficiency of someone used to making do with little. "You look at that coffee like it's going to attack you," she said, setting a plate in front of him. "Sometimes it tastes like it might." He took a bite of cornbread and had to close his eyes. This is really good. My grandmother's recipe, though she had eggs and buttermilk to work with. Lila sat across from him, eating small, careful bites like someone who'd learned not to count on the next meal. They ate in comfortable quiet, the only sounds the rain on the roof and the occasional pop from the stove. Matt found himself studying her when she wasn't looking the way she held herself straight despite obvious pain. The careful grace of her movements, the watchful intelligence in those amber eyes. "Stop that," she said without looking up. "Stop what?" "Trying to figure me out. Just ask." Matt considered. "All right. Who gave you that bruise?" "A man who thought he owned things he didn't." She touched her cheek lightly. "It's healing. And the bag." Her fingers tightened on her fork. "Papers, legal documents, proof that I'm not a thief. Whatever they're saying in town." "Who's they?" "Carter Voss. You know him." Matt nodded slowly. Everyone knew Carter Voss owned the Mercantile, the feed store, and held paper on half the small farms around Red Bluff. Had dealings with him when I first came here. Didn't care for his terms. "Smart man." Lila pushed beans around her plate. "My husband William he borrowed against our land 3 years ago. Bad winter. Lost most our cattle. The terms were hard but fair, or so we thought. Bill worked himself into an early grave trying to meet them. Died 4 months ago." "I'm sorry." She waved that away. "After he died, Voss came calling, showed me papers saying the interest had compounded in ways Bill never agreed to. Said I owed triple what we borrowed. When I showed him the receipts proving we'd paid the original interest, he said they were forgeries. Let me guess Sheriff Dugan backed him up." "You do know how things work around here." Her smile was sharp as winter wind. "Voss gave me a choice. Sign over the land or face charges for fraud. When I refused, he suggested other ways a widow might pay her debts." Matt's hand tightened on his coffee cup. "That when you got the bruise?" "That was when I ran. Middle of the night. Took what papers I could carry." She touched the canvas bag beside her chair. "Voss put out word I'd stolen money from his safe. Said any man who brought me back would get a finder's fee." "So you were heading where when the river caught you?" "Downstream. Heard there might be work in Casper. Didn't figure on the spring melt coming so fast." She met his eyes. "Now you know. You can take me to town. Collect your fee. I won't fight you." Matt stood abruptly, chair scraping. Lila tensed, but he just carried his plate to the wash basin. "I ever tell you why I left the army?" "No." "Made a promise to a dying man. Said I'd look after his family when I got home. By the time I made it back to Ohio, his widow had remarried and moved on. Didn't need or want my help." He pumped water into the basin, watching it run cloudy. "Been carrying that broken promise for 10 years. Maybe that's why I pulled you from that river. Maybe I just don't like bullies. Either way, you're not going anywhere you don't want to go." Lila was quiet so long he thought she might not speak at all. Then, "I can't pay you for protection." "Don't recall asking for pay." He turned back to her. "You pulled those weeds yet?" That surprised a laugh out of her, short but genuine. "The garden's under 6 inches of mud." "Then I guess you'll have to stay until it dries out." Over the next days, they developed a rhythm. Lila took over the cooking and housekeeping with a determination that suggested she needed to be useful more than she needed to rest. Matt worked on reinforcing the cabin against future floods and salvaging what he could from the garden. They talked while they worked, careful conversations that skirted deep water. Matt learned that Lila had come west as a bride at 17, that she could read and figure better than most men, that she'd once helped the town doctor deliver a baby when he was too drunk to manage alone. "You should have seen his face," she said, patching a hole in Matt's spare shirt. "Sobered him right up when that baby came out healthy and squalling. The mother named her Hope, and I thought that was about right." "You ever think about doctoring yourself?" "Women don't get to be doctors." but there was wistfulness in her voice. Women don't get to do a lot of things. Doesn't stop some of them. She looked at him sharply, like he'd said something in a foreign language she almost understood. Evenings were the hardest. When dark fell and work stopped, the cabin felt smaller. They sat by the stove, Matt cleaning his rifle or mending tack, Lila reading from his few books or working on the endless mending. The domesticity of it made something ache in Matt's chest, a glimpse of a life he'd never planned for. One night, while rain hammered the roof, Lila asked, "Do you ever get lonely out here?" "Sometimes." He concentrated on oiling his rifle's action. "Less than I did in towns." "That doesn't make sense. You can be surrounded by people and still be alone. Out here, at least the solitude's honest." She considered that. "I was lonely in my own house after Bill died. Not just missing him, but—" She paused, searching for words. "It was like I became invisible. The good women wouldn't talk to me because I was too young to be a proper widow. The men wouldn't leave me alone because I was too young to be a proper widow. I was just nothing. A problem to be solved or an opportunity to be seized." "You're not nothing." The words came out fiercer than Matt intended. Their eyes met across the small space, and something passed between them, recognition, maybe, or the first spark of possibility. Then Lila looked away, color rising in her unblemished cheek. "I should check the cornbread," she said, though they both knew it had another 10 minutes. That night, sorting through Lila's bag to dry the water-damaged papers, Matt found the rope. Not just any rope, a short length of braided hemp, the kind used for a noose. It was wrapped in oilcloth, deliberate amid the legal documents. "Planning to hang someone?" he asked, keeping his voice light. Lila went very still. "It was around Bill's neck when I found him in the barn." Her voice was steady as stone. "Sheriff said suicide, said Bill couldn't face his debts, but Bill's hands were soft, no rope burns from climbing up to tie it, and his feet were flat on the ground. Someone stood him on a bucket and kicked it away." Matt felt the world tilt, pieces clicking into place. "Voss!" "Can't prove it, but 2 days before Bill died, he'd found an assessor's report saying there might be silver deposits near our creek. Showed it to Voss when arguing about the loan." She took the rope from Matt's hands, wrapped it carefully again. "I keep this to remember. When I'm far enough away, when I'm strong enough, I'll come back, and I'll find proof." That's a heavy burden to carry alone. Been carrying it this long. Matt wanted to tell her she didn't have to carry it at all, but that wasn't his choice to make. Instead, he said, "River should be down enough to check the crossing tomorrow. See how bad the damage is." "You wanting to be rid of me?" "No." The admission surprised him with its certainty. "But you should know what your options are. Make choices based on what is, not what you fear." She studied him in the lamplight. "You're not what I expected, Matthew Cole." "What did you expect?" "I don't know, but not kindness without condition, not respect without price." She stood, moving toward the bed. "The world taught me different lessons." "World teaches a lot of things. Don't mean they're all true." As she settled for sleep, Lila said softly, "I'll stay until the garden's weeded proper. Fair's fair." Matt smiled in the darkness. "Fair's fair." But they both knew she wasn't staying for the garden. Something was growing between them, tender as new shoots and just as vulnerable to killing frost. Neither quite trusted it yet. This fragile possibility, but it was there, taking root in the silence between words, in the careful distance they kept, in the way their eyes met and held a heartbeat too long. Outside, the river was dropping, soon to release its hold on the valley. Choices would have to be made, directions chosen, but for now, in the lamplit cabin with rain gentling into mist, two wounded souls found a moment's peace in simply not being alone. The rope stayed wrapped in its oilcloth, waiting, and Matt began to think that maybe some promises were worth making again, even for those who'd learned the weight of breaking them. The cold came sudden that night, unseasonable for late spring. Matt had noticed Lila favoring her left ankle all day, though she'd tried to hide it. When she'd bent to gather kindling, he'd seen her bite back a wince the same ankle that had been trapped in the river debris. "That's enough wood," he called from the doorway. "Come inside before you make that foot worse." "It's fine." But her protest lacked conviction, and when she tried to lift the kindling bundle, her ankle buckled. Matt caught her arm before she could fall. "Fine," she says. He took the wood from her, noting how she leaned into his support for just a moment before pulling away. "Inside, now." The cabin felt smaller in the lamplight, shadows dancing on the walls. Matt settled Lila in the chair nearest the stove and knelt to examine her ankle. It was swollen, purple-green bruising spreading like spilled ink. "Why didn't you say something this morning?" "Because you'd have fussed," she hissed when he probed the swelling gently. "And I've been enough trouble." "You've been no trouble." He fetched a basin of cold water and clean cloths. "This needs to be wrapped proper. Keep you off it for a day or two." "I can't," she stopped, jaw tightening. "I should go. The river's down enough. I could make it to wear Casper on that ankle in this cold." Matt shook his head. "Sometimes the smartest thing is knowing when to stay put." He worked in silence, soaking strips of cloth in the cold water, wrapping her ankle with practiced efficiency. The fire crackled in the stove. Outside, wind rattled the windows, promising a bitter night. "You've done this before," Lila observed, watching his hands. "Field medicine. Learned more than I wanted about treating injuries." He tied off the wrapping, sat back on his heels. "That should help with the swelling." "Thank you." The words came soft, almost lost in the fire's whisper. Matt rose, adding more wood to the stove. The temperature was dropping fast. He could see his breath in the corners of the room. "Going to be a cold one. I'll bank the fire high, but—" "I'm taking your bed again." Guilt colored her voice. "You'll freeze on that floor." "Slept in worse places." "That's not—" She stopped, something shifting in her expression. Fear flickered there, chased by determination. Then something else, a terrible resignation that made Matt's chest tighten. Lila stood carefully, favoring the wrapped ankle. She moved closer to the stove, to him, and he saw her hands tremble as she reached for the buttons of her borrowed shirt. "Will you stay if I undress?" The words came out barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on the floor. It's warm enough by the fire. And you've been kind. I know how to pay for kindness." The words hit Matt like a physical blow. He understood suddenly, with terrible clarity, what lessons the world had taught Lila Hart. What kind of kindness had come with a price tag she'd been forced to pay before. He turned his back to her, deliberately, completely. Heard her sharp intake of breath surprise. Maybe, or hurt. He kept his voice level, calm as deep water. "Nobody's asking for payment here. You're hurt and it's cold. You take the bed, stay warm. I'll tend the fire." "But her voice cracked. "This is how it works. You saved me, fed me, sheltered me. Men don't do that for nothing." "Some men don't." Matt stared at the wall, fists clenched at his sides. Not from desire, though he'd be lying if he said he felt nothing for her, but from rage at whoever had taught her this was all she had to offer. "I'm not some men. Now get yourself to bed before that ankle swells more." Behind him, he heard a sound that might have been a sob, then footsteps, uneven with her injury, moving away. The bed ropes creaked, then silence except for the fire and wind. Matt stayed facing the wall, wrestling with emotions that wanted to tear free, after what felt like hours but was probably minutes. Her voice came small from the darkness. "I don't understand you." "What's to understand? You want nothing from me. That's not men always want something." Matt finally turned, though he couldn't see her in the bed's shadows. "I want something." She went very still. "I want you to heal up proper. Want you to eat when you're hungry and sleep when you're tired. Want you to stop looking over your shoulder like something's about to bite." He paused, choosing words careful as stepping through broken glass. "Want you to maybe believe that kindness doesn't always come with a bill attached." Quiet stretched between them, broken only by the stove's crackle and the wind's moan. Then, so soft he almost missed it. "Why?" "Because everyone deserves that much. Because you remind me—" He stopped. Too much truth in that direction. "Just because—" More silence. Then he heard it tears. Not the desperate sobs of the river rescue or the single crack of emotion from moments before. These were different tears, quiet and endless, like spring rain after drought. Matt didn't move toward her, didn't offer comfort that might be misread. He simply sat by the stove and did what he'd promised tended the fire. After a long while, the tears stopped. Her breathing evened out but didn't quite find the rhythm of sleep. "My husband's brother," she said into the darkness. "After Bill died, said I could stay on the farm if I was accommodating. When I refused, he spread stories, said I'd been accommodating with half the county while Bill was alive, made it easier for Voss to paint me as a thief and worse. I'm sorry. Then in town, trying to find work, the hotel manager, the saloon owner, even the minister who came to pray with me." A bitter laugh. All had their price for kindness. I learned to see it coming, the look in their eyes that said they were calculating what I was worth, what they could get. That why you wanted me to leave you by the river, figured I'd want payment too. Death seemed cleaner than owing another debt I couldn't pay honorably. The words sat heavy between them. Matt fed another log to the fire, watched sparks spiral up the chimney. "My mother," he said finally, "worked in a factory after my father died. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. The floor manager, he took a liking to her, made it clear her job depended on how nice she was to him." He paused, memories bitter as old coffee. "She was nice enough to keep us eating for 2 years. Then she got sick from it all, the work, the shame, the weight of what she carried. Died when I was 14. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be angry. She deserved better. You deserve better." He turned to look at the bed, though he still couldn't see her. "That's why I turned my back. Not because I don't think you're, not because you aren't." Words failed him. Because nobody should have to pay for basic human decency with pieces of themselves. The wind gusted, rattling the windows. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks against the grate. In the bed, Lila shifted. "I used to be different," she said. "Before, used to believe in things. Good people, happy endings. Bill and I, we were going to build something. Have children. Grow old watching sunsets from that porch he never finished building." Her voice caught. "Now I don't know who I am anymore. Just what I'm not." "That's a start. Knowing what you're not." "What am I not? Matthew Cole." He considered. "You're not nothing. Not invisible. Not for sale. Not alone unless you choose to be." "What am I, then?" "Survivor. Fighter. Woman who makes cornbread like an angel and pulls weeds like she's got a grudge against the earth." He allowed a small smile. "Person worth knowing, if she'll let herself be known." She was quiet so long he thought she'd finally found sleep. Then, "Will you tell me about the war when you can't sleep?" It was a strange request, but Matt understood. Sometimes the only way to fight one darkness was with another. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything. Just talk, so I know you're there." So Matt talked, told her about mud and waiting, about friends made and lost, about the way coffee tasted after 3 days without sleep. Told her about the chaplain who'd lost his faith at Antietam and found it again at Gettysburg. About the Confederate boy couldn't have been more than 15 who'd shared his hardtack during an informal truce, then died the next day when the fighting resumed. Somewhere in the telling, her breathing finally found the rhythm of true sleep. Matt kept talking anyway, voice low as the fire's murmur, talking to her, to himself. to the ghosts that never quite left him alone. The fire burned low. He fed it again, then settled on his bedroll, not on the far side of the room as he had been, but closer to the stove, to her, not improper close, but close enough that she'd hear him breathing if she woke afraid. "Thank you," came her voice, drowsy with near sleep he'd thought had already claimed her. "For what? For turning your back, for seeing me as more than—" A yawn interrupted. "Just thank you." Matt stared at the ceiling, listening to wind and breathing and the settling of old wood. "You're welcome," he said to the darkness. Tomorrow would bring decisions. The river was passable now. She could leave if she chose, head to Casper or anywhere else that promised a new start. Or she could stay, face down Voss and the ugly stories, fight for what was hers. But tonight, in a cabin wrapped in cold and firelight, two people had found something rare, understanding without judgment, kindness without cost. It wasn't love. Not yet, maybe not ever, but it was human connection at its most basic and necessary, the simple recognition of one wounded soul by another. The fire crackled. The wind sang its lonesome song, and Matt kept watch through the long darkness, guardian of something fragile and precious that had no name yet but deserved the chance to grow. The river had dropped enough by week's end to reveal its damaged fence posts askew like broken teeth, Matt's lower pasture thick with silt, and a new channel carved where the old willow used to stand. But the morning brought worse news in the form of hoofbeats approaching from the east. Matt was splitting wood when he saw the rider coming hard. He set down the axe, hand moving instinctively toward the rifle propped against the woodpile. But as the rider drew closer, he recognized the gray mare and the woman riding her. Nora Pike hadn't changed much in the 2 years since Matt had last seen her in town. Still ramrod straight in the saddle, still wearing widow's black, though her husband had been dead near 5 years. Her boarding house in Red Bluff was one of the few respectable establishments that didn't bow to Carter Voss's money. "Mrs. Pike." Matt helped her down, noting the urgency in her movements. "Long ride for a social call." "This isn't social." Her sharp eyes swept the homestead, lingering on the smoke rising from his chimney. "Is she here?" "No point pretending ignorance." "Inside, hurt her ankle in the river." "Thank the Lord." Nora pressed a hand to her chest. "When I heard she'd gone missing the same night the river rose, I feared the worst." "Come in, coffee's hot." Nora entered the cabin like a general surveying a battlefield. Her gaze took in the tidy space, the woman's touch already evident in small ways, wildflowers in a jar, the swept floor, shirts mended and folded. Lila rose from the table where she'd been working on Matt's account books, face lighting with surprise. "Nora." The older woman crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "You foolish girl, running off in the night like that." "I couldn't stay, not after—" "I know." Nora held her at arm's length, examining the fading bruise, the wrapped ankle. "Voss came by the boarding house looking for you. Had Sheriff Dugan with him and 2 of those rough men he keeps on payroll." Matt poured coffee, staying quiet but watchful. Lila sank back into her chair, fingers worrying at the account book's edges. "What are they saying?" Lila asked. "That you broke into Voss's safe, stole money meant for the town's building fund." Nora's mouth twisted. "Course, anyone with sense knows there never was any building fund, just Voss's pocket. But sense seems in short supply when money talks." "How much?" Matt asked. $500, enough to make it a hanging offense if they push it." Nora turned to him. "They're also saying you might be hiding her. Voss has his men watching the roads." Lila's face had gone pale. "Matt's got nothing to do with this. I should go—" "You should sit still and think." Matt's voice came out harder than intended. "Running makes you look guilty. Staying makes you a target," Lila countered. "I won't have you." "Won't have me what, helping too late for that." He turned to Nora. "What's the real play here? Voss doesn't need $500. Nora sipped her coffee, choosing her words. The Hart place sits on Sweetwater Creek just where it comes out of the hills. Pretty piece of land. With possible mineral deposits, Matt said, understanding dawning. He wants the land legal-like, not just seized for debt. If she's a fugitive, he can buy it for back taxes when the county seizes it, clean and legal. Nora set down her cup. There's more. Voss has been buying up parcels all along the creek. The Hart place is the last piece he needs. For what? Railroad spur, maybe, or mining operation. Either way, he needs clear title. She looked at Lila. Your husband was smarter than Voss figured. Those papers you saved are the mineral surveys in there. Lila nodded. 2 of them, plus the original loan agreement and receipts. Then you've got leverage. Question is how to use it without getting shot for your trouble. Matt had been thinking, pieces falling into place. What about the federal judge? Doesn't he make circuit through here next month? Judge Merrick, yes, but... Nora frowned. That's weeks away. Voss won't wait that long. He will if he can't find her. You can't hide her here forever. His men aren't stupid. Don't need forever, just long enough to get word to the right people. Matt moved to the window, checking the road. Mrs. Pike, you still correspond with that newspaper fellow in Cheyenne. A smile ghosted across Nora's face. Thomas Hartley. He does enjoy a good story about corruption. Might be we could give him one. But first, we need to make Voss nervous enough to make mistakes. He turned to Lila. How much do you know about those mineral surveys? Enough. Bill studied them for weeks. There's a vein of silver ore that runs right through the property. Her chin lifted. Good quality ore, according to the assessor. Worth killing for. The question hung heavy. Lila touched the canvas bag where the rope lay hidden. Yes. Then we need to be smarter than Voss expects. Matt pulled out a chair, straddled it backward. Mrs. Pike, can you get word to Hartley without Voss knowing? I've been outsmarting men like Carter Voss since before you were born. Mr. Cole. Good. Tell him there's a story brewing. Loan fraud, false accusations, maybe murder. He caught Lila's sharp intake of breath. But tell him to sit on it for now. We need insurance, not a war. What about Sheriff Dugan? Lila asked. He's in Voss's pocket deep. Dugan's greedy, not stupid. If he thinks the federal judge might get involved, he'll think twice about his loyalties. Matt stood. Decision made. I'll ride to town tomorrow. Feel things out. No. Lila's hand shot out, caught his sleeve. They'll arrest you for harboring... They'll try. He covered her hand with his, brief but warm. Trust me, I've faced worse than small-town bullies. Nora watched the exchange with interest. Well, seems you've found yourself a champion. Lila. I don't need... Yes, you do. Nora's voice brooked no argument. We all need allies sometimes. No shame in accepting help from a good man. She rose, gathering her gloves. I should get back before I missed. Lila, I'll put word out quiet-like that you're safe. There's folks in town who don't buy Voss's story. Tell them to keep their doubts to themselves for now, Matt advised. We don't want Voss feeling cornered yet. After Nora left, the cabin felt smaller. Lila stood at the window, watching the dust of Nora's departure settle. I've brought trouble to your door, she said quietly. That's not what I wanted. Trouble was already heading this way. Voss types don't stop at one victory. Matt moved beside her, not quite touching. Question is, do we meet it head-on or wait for it to find us? She turned to him, those amber eyes searching. This isn't your fight. Made it mine when I pulled you from that river. He paused, then admitted a deeper truth. Maybe I've been looking for a fight worth having. Been running from things so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand for something. And I'm something worth standing for. The vulnerability in her voice near broke him. You are, whether you see it or not. They stood there, sunset painting the valley gold, neither speaking. Finally, Lila said, "If we do this fight, Voss people will talk about you and me living here. They'll say ugly things. Let them talk. Words don't break bones. They break other things, reputations, futures. Only if you let them." He faced her fully. "I'm not ashamed of helping you. Not ashamed of—" He stopped, not quite ready for where that sentence led. People who matter will judge by actions, not gossip. That night, they made plans. Matt would ride to town, gauge the temperature, maybe rattle Voss's cage a little. Lila would stay put, work on documenting everything in those papers, build the case they'd need for Judge Merrick. "I can shoot," she offered as Matt cleaned his rifle. "Bill taught me. Have his old Colt in the bag." "Good, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. Hope's thin armor against men like Voss." "Maybe, but it's better than despair." She smiled then, small but real. "Is that what we're calling this hope?" "Good a name as any." Later, bedded down in their separate spaces, Lila spoke into the darkness. "Matt." "Yeah." "What you said about looking for a fight worth having, is that true?" He considered lying, keeping things simple. But they'd moved past simple. "Yeah, man can only drift so long before he needs to plant his feet somewhere. And you're planting them here for a woman you barely know." "I know enough. Know you're tough enough to survive what would break most people. Know you're kind even when the world hasn't been kind back. Know you make a man want to be better than he is." Silence stretched, then soft as prayer. "You already are better than you think." Matthew Cole. Sleep came easier that night, despite what tomorrow might bring. Outside, coyotes sang to the stars. Inside, two people lay wakeful but not alone, building something fragile from trust and determination. The fight was coming. Voss wouldn't wait long, and his kind of justice came from the barrel of a gun or the weight of $1. But for now, in the quiet cabin by the river, hope took root alongside something that might, given time and courage, grow into love. Matt had forgotten what it felt like to have something to protect besides his own solitude. Lila had forgotten what it felt like to be protected without price. Together, they were remembering. Red Bluff on market day was a study in contradictions. Farmers' wives sold eggs next to Chinese laundrymen hawking services. Cowboys fresh off the trail mingled with merchants in their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes. And through it all, Carter Voss's influence spread like oil on water, visible in every forced smile, every glance over shoulders, every conversation that died when his men passed by. Matt tied his horse outside the general store, taking his time, letting himself be seen. If Voss wanted to play games, best to lay the cards on the table. Well, Matt Cole." Sheriff Dugan's voice carried across the street like a bad smell. "Heard you might be coming to town." Matt turned slow, hands visible and easy. Dugan stood with 2 deputies, one of them young Tom Avery, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Sheriff, fine morning for a ride." "That it is." Dugan hooked his thumbs in his gun belt, belly straining against his vest. "Also a fine morning for harboring fugitives, from what I hear." "Can't say I've seen any fugitives, just a woman near drowned in the flood." "That so this woman have a name?" "Most folks do." Dugan's face reddened. "Don't get smart with me. Cole, I could arrest you right now for obstruction." "You could try." Matt kept his voice mild as milk. "Course, that'd mean explaining to Judge Merrick next month why you arrested a man for saving someone from drowning. Might make for interesting testimony." Deputy Avery shifted slightly, and Matt caught something in his expression: doubt. Maybe. Or the first stirrings of conscience. Dugan noticed too. "Get back on patrol. Avery, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, Sheriff, it might." The young deputy's voice was steady, though his hand trembled slightly. If we're talking about the heart case, there's some questions. I said get. Avery held Dugan's stare for a heartbeat, then turned and walked away, but not before giving Matt the slightest nod. You're making enemies, Cole, Dugan said when they were alone. That's not healthy in a town like this. Neither is letting innocent women drown. Guess we all make our choices. Matt turned his back on the sheriff, calculated insult, and entered the store. Inside, conversations hushed. He bought coffee, flour, salt, normal things. Let people see him unconcerned. Mr. Cole. He turned to find Sarah Walsh, the young laundress from Nora's boarding house, barely 18, pretty in a tired way, with worry lines that belonged on an older face. Miss Walsh. She glanced around nervously, then stepped closer. Is Mrs. Hartwell, Mrs. Pike said she was safe, but she's recovering. Matt studied the girl's face, seeing genuine concern there. You know her? She helped me once, when I had trouble. Sarah's hand went unconsciously to her belly, and Matt understood. She didn't judge, just helped. Not many would have. She's that kind of person. Yes, Sarah leaned closer, voice dropping. Mr. Cole, be careful. Mr. Voss has been asking questions about you, about your past. He's sent telegrams east. Matt's jaw tightened. Has he now? My friend works at the telegraph office. She mentioned it. Sarah backed away as another customer entered. Just be careful. Both of you. Matt left the store with more to think about than he'd come with. If Voss was digging into his past, things might get complicated. Not that Matt had much to hide. His war record was clean, his discharge honorable. But a determined man could twist any history into a weapon. He made his way to Nora Pike's boarding house, a 2-story frame building that had seen better days but wore its age with dignity. Nora herself answered his knock. Mr. Cole, come in, quickly! The parlor was empty, save for an elderly man dozing by the window. Nora led Matt to the kitchen, where coffee perpetually simmered. Any trouble, she asked. Dugan tried to rattle me. Didn't take. He accepted the coffee she poured. Your Deputy Avery might be worth cultivating. Boy's got a conscience trying to grow. Tom's a good boy. His father was a minister. Tried to raise him right. Nora sipped her own cup. Problem is, good boys don't last long wearing badges in towns like this. Maybe we can change that. Matt set down his cup. I need you to get word to Lila. Tell her to stay put. No matter what she hears, things might get ugly before they get better. Already ugly, if you ask me. Nora moved to the window, checking the street. Voss came by yesterday. Wanted to search the rooms. I told him I'd see him in hell first. Bet he liked that. About as much as you'd expect. She turned back. Matt, Mr. Cole, that girl cares for you. I can see it in her eyes when she speaks of you. Mrs. Pike. I'm not matchmaking. Lord knows this is no time for romance. But caring makes people vulnerable. Makes them do foolish things. Her sharp eyes pinned him. Don't let her do anything foolish for your sake. I won't let her do anything foolish for any sake. See that you don't. Matt was halfway back to his horse when it happened. 2 men stepped from the alley beside the milliner's shop, rough types with scarred knuckles and empty eyes, the kind Voss kept on payroll for work the sheriff couldn't officially do. Mr. Cole, the taller one smiled without humor. Boss wants a word. Tell Voss he knows where to find me. My door's always open to neighbors. He'd prefer somewhere more private-like. And I'd prefer to be left alone. Guess we're both disappointed. The shorter man's hand drifted toward his gun. Wasn't really a request. Matt sighed. He'd hoped to avoid this, but some men only understood one language. His elbow caught the tall one in the solar plexus, dropping him gasping. The short one went for his gun, but Matt was already moving. Muscle memory from a dozen battlefield brawls taking over, The fight was brief and ugly. Matt took a cut on his shoulder from a concealed knife, gave back worse. When it ended, both of Voss's men were on the ground alive, but discouraged from immediate pursuit. "Tell your boss," Matt said, pressing a hand to his bleeding shoulder, "that I'll be happy to discuss anything he wants, in daylight, in public, like civilized men." He was untying his horse when Deputy Avery appeared, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "I didn't see anything," the young man said quickly. "But you might want to get that shoulder looked at. And Mr. Cole, some of us remember what justice is supposed to look like. We're just waiting for someone to show us it's still possible." Matt rode out of town feeling the weight of eyes on his back. The shoulder burned, but he'd had worse. What troubled him more was knowing he'd just escalated things. Voss wouldn't let this pass. Night was falling when he reached the cabin. Lila burst out before he'd even dismounted, face white with worry. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. Scratch." But he let her help him inside, suddenly tired beyond measure. She worked in tense silence, cleaning the wound, wrapping it with steady hands that only shook when the job was done. Then she surprised him. "You damned fool." Her voice was fierce, tears threatening. "You absolute damned fool. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking—" He stopped, caught by the raw fear in her eyes. "I was thinking about you, about keeping you safe." "By getting yourself killed, that's your plan." She threw the bloody cloth into the basin with force. "I'm not worth that. Matthew Cole. I'm not worth any man's life." "That's where you're wrong." He caught her hand as she turned away. "You're worth a dozen of Voss and his kind. Worth fighting for. Worth—" The words died as she kissed him. Not gentle, not romantic, desperate and fierce and tasting of tears. When she pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Don't you die on me," she whispered. "Don't you dare. I've buried one man I cared for. I won't do it again." "I'm not planning on dying." "Bill wasn't either." She pressed her forehead to his. "Promise me. Promise you'll be careful." "I promise to be as careful as the situation allows." "That's not—" "That's all I can promise. But I swear I won't leave you alone to face this. Whatever comes, we face it together." She pulled back, studying his face. Then, finding what she looked for, she nodded. "Together." Later, as she rebandaged his shoulder by lamplight, Lila told him about her day. She'd found something in Bill's papers notes he'd made about other property transfers Voss had handled. A pattern of pressure, intimidation, and convenient accidents. "He's done this before," she said. "The widow Martinez, the Olsen family, others. Always the same loans that go bad. Pressure to sell, and if they resist—" "We need to get this to the newspaper man. And Judge Merrick. Will it be enough?" Matt thought about Deputy Avery's words, about Sarah Walsh's gratitude, about Nora Pike's defiance. It's a start, and sometimes a start is all you need to change things. That night they sat together by the stove, not touching, but close. The cabin felt like a fortress against the dark. Though they both knew it was illusion, Voss would come. One way or another. The question was whether they'd be ready. "I delivered a baby today," Lila said suddenly. Matt looked at her in surprise. "What?" "Well, helped. Sarah Walsh, the laundress from town. She went into labor right after you left. Nora sent for me." A smile touched her lips. "A little girl. Perfect and pink and loud as anything." Sarah named her Hope. "After the first baby you delivered?" She remembered the story. Lila's smile faded. "That's what we're fighting for, isn't it? So girls like that baby can grow up in a place where justice means something. Where strength isn't just about who has the most guns or the deepest pockets." "Yes," Matt said simply. "That's what we're fighting for." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds owl calls, wind in the pines, the distant yip of coyotes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, They had this connection, purpose, and the fragile beginning of something that might sustain them through whatever darkness lay ahead. The wound on Matt's shoulder throbbed, reminder of the price of defiance. But looking at Lila in the firelight, strong and determined and achingly beautiful, he knew he'd pay it again. Some things were worth the cost. Some people were worth any cost. The dust storm rolled in from the west like Judgment Day, turning the morning sky the color of old blood. Matt had seen its like before, spring winds colliding with drought-loose soil, creating a wall of dirt that could blind a man in seconds. But this one came with riders. "They're here," Lila said from the window, her voice steady despite the fear Matt could see in her shoulders. 6, maybe 7 men. "Get the rifle. And Bill's Colt." Matt checked his own weapon, movements calm from long practice. "Remember what I taught you? Aim for center mass. Squeeze, don't jerk. Keep shooting until they stop moving." She recited it like a prayer. "I remember." The riders stopped just outside rifle range, dark shapes against the darker sky. Voss sat his horse in the center, Sheriff Dugan beside him. The others were hired muscle, faces covered against the dust. "Cole," Voss's voice carried on the wind. "Send out the woman and we ride away. No one needs to get hurt." "Seems like people already have been hurt," Matt called back. "Ask the widow Martinez. Ask the Olsons." Even at distance, he could see Voss stiffen. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough. So does that newspaper man in Cheyenne. Be a shame if he published those stories before Judge Merrick arrives." "You're bluffing." "Maybe. Want to bet your neck on it?" The wind picked up, dust swirling thicker. Matt saw 2 riders peel off, heading around to flank the cabin. He'd expected that. "Lila," he said quietly, "they're going to rush us when the storm hits full. Take the back window. Anyone comes through, you stop them." "What about you?" "I'll handle the front." He touched her arm briefly. "We just need to hold until what help arrives, no one's coming, Matt. Have faith." "In what?" "In Deputy Avery, in people doing the right thing when it counts." He moved to his position. "And if that fails, have faith in our ability to make these bastards pay dear for trying." The storm hit like a physical thing, turning the world into a brown, howling void. Matt heard rather than saw the rush boots on hard ground, harsh breathing, the metallic click of weapons readying. The first man through the door caught Matt's rifle butt in the face, going down hard. The second got a shot off, splinters exploding from the door frame inches from Matt's head. He fired back. Center mass. Watched the shadow crumple. From the back of the cabin came the boom of Bill's Colt once, twice, then Lila's voice, high and fierce. "The window, Matt, the window." He spun to see a figure halfway through the side window, pistol rising. Matt's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him back into the storm. But more were coming, shadows in the dust. "Inside," Dugan's voice, closer now. "Take them alive if you can, dead if you can't." Matt barricaded the door with the table, heard Lila doing the same at the back. They met in the middle of the cabin, both breathing hard. "How many?" he asked. 2 down, maybe 3. "You." "Same, but they'll regroup. Come at us together." "I'm almost out of bullets." Matt handed her his spare ammunition. Their fingers brushed, and she caught his hand. "If we don't, we will. But if we don't..." Whatever she might have said was lost as the front door exploded inward, kicked by boots and desperation. The storm followed, turning the cabin into a whirlwind of dust and violence. Matt lost track of individual moments. It became a melee, fists and gunfire. Furniture overturning, men shouting in pain and rage. He glimpsed Lila swinging a chair, connecting with someone's skull, felt the burn of a bullet grazing his ribs, tasted blood and dirt. Then, through the chaos, came a sound that didn't belong, a bugle call, clear and military sharp, cutting through the storm's howl. "What the hell?" someone shouted. The fighting paused, everyone turning toward the sound. Through the dust, Matt could make out shapes riders, lots of them, moving in formation. "Federal marshals," a voice boomed. "Everyone drop your weapons now." Matt had never been happier to comply with an order. Around him, Voss's men did the same, suddenly looking less like predators and more like cornered rats. The dust began to settle, revealing Deputy Tom Avery at the head of a column of men. Real federal marshals, badges glinting despite the dirt, and beside them, Judge Merrick. Voss's voice cracked. "You're not due for 3 weeks." The judge, a stern man with steel-gray whiskers, dismounted with surprising agility. "Got an interesting telegram from a newspaper friend in Cheyenne. Seemed I was needed sooner rather than later." His eyes swept the scene, the wounded men, the bullet-riddled cabin, Matt and Lila standing together, battered but unbroken. "Deputy Avery, arrest these men." "You can't," Voss blustered. "I'm a respectable businessman. She's the thief, check her bag. You'll find—" "What we'll find," Judge Merrick interrupted, "is evidence, documents, testimonies, the real kind, not the manufactured variety." He turned to Dugan. "Sheriff, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. Deputy Avery will serve as acting sheriff." "This is illegal," Dugan protested. "You have no authority." "I have a federal warrant," the judge said mildly. "Issued based on evidence of loan fraud, intimidation, and possible murder across 3 counties. Seems Mr. Voss has been busy." As the marshals worked, cuffing prisoners and tending wounded, Judge Merrick approached Matt and Lila. Up close, his stern face showed traces of humor. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Hart, are you injured?" "Nothing that won't heal," Matt said, though his ribs suggested otherwise. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Hart." The judge continued. "This should have been stopped sooner, but Voss was careful, and evidence takes time to gather." "You were investigating him." Lila's voice was faint with shock. "For 6 months. Your husband's death was the final piece we needed. His notes, which I understand you preserved, connected Voss to similar schemes across the territory." Lila swayed, and Matt caught her arm. The judge's expression softened. "Sit down, both of you. Deputy Avery, bring water." He waited until they were seated on the cabin's shot-up porch. "Mrs. Hart, I need to ask, do you want to press charges for your husband's murder?" "Can you prove it?" Her voice was steady now, harder than iron. "With your testimony and the evidence we've gathered, yes, I believe we can." "Then yes, I want justice for Bill." "You'll have it." The judge turned to Matt. "Mr. Cole, I understand you served with distinction in the war." "I served. The distinction part's debatable." "Not according to Colonel Washburn. He speaks highly of you in his letters." Matt blinked. "You know James Washburn?" "We serve on a veterans committee together. He mentioned you'd headed west, seeking quiet." The judge surveyed the bullet-riddled cabin. "Found it. Did you—" "Despite everything," Matt laughed. "Not exactly. The cleanup took hours. Statements were given, evidence cataloged, wounded tended. 3 of Voss's men were dead, 2 others badly hurt. Voss himself was uninjured but seemed to have aged a decade. His bluster replaced by the hollow look of a man seeing his empire crumble. As they loaded him into the prison wagon, he stopped by Lila. "This isn't over." "Yes," she said quietly. "It is. For you, for Bill, for all of it. It's over." He had no answer to that. As the sun set, painting the dust-hazed sky in shades of copper and rose, Matt and Lila found themselves alone on the porch. The cabin was a wreck, windows shot out, furniture destroyed, but it stood. "We'll need to rebuild," Matt said. Unless you're planning to leave, take your land back, start over." Lila was quiet for a long moment. I could do that, the judge says with Voss's conviction. All his fraudulent loans will be void. I'll get the farm back free and clear. That's good. You deserve. I don't want it. The words came fast, like she was afraid to let them slow. Too many ghosts there. Too many memories of what was and can't be again. So what do you want? She turned to him, and in the dying light, her eyes were gold. I want to build something new, something that's mine, ours. If you'll have me, no ghosts, no debts, no looking back. Lila, I know we've only known each other a short time. I know it's not proper, me staying here, but proper hasn't done much for me. And I'm tired of caring what people think. She took his hand, her fingers strong and sure. I'm not asking for promises, just possibilities, just the chance to see what we might build together. Matt lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles. I never was much good at proper either. Is that a yes? That's a let's start with fixing the windows and see where we go from there. She laughed, the sound bright as water after drought. Practical. I like that in a man. Good thing, because romantic poetry isn't really my strength. You jumped in a flooding river to save a stranger. You stood against a dozen men to protect me. That's poetry enough. They sat together as stars began to prick the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring questions, challenges, the hard work of rebuilding more than just walls and windows. But tonight, they had survived. They had won, and they had each other. Matt, Lila said softly. Yeah. Thank you for turning your back that night, for seeing me as more than what the world tried to make me, for everything. Thank you, he replied, for reminding me that some things are worth fighting for. In the distance, a coyote called, answered by another. The ordinary sounds of a Wyoming night, made extraordinary by the fact that they were alive to hear them. Together, they watched the stars come out, each one a promise that darkness, no matter how complete, was never permanent. The broken door swung on its hinges, and dust settled in the corners. But the cabin stood battered, perhaps, scarred, certainly, but still standing. Just like them, the courthouse in Red Bluff wasn't built for crowds. On the morning of the hearing, it overflowed onto Main Street, so Judge Merrick moved proceedings to the only space big enough, the covered porch of the town hall. Someone had brought benches from the church. Others stood, packed tight as cattle in a pen. All come to see justice done or perverted, depending on their loyalties. Matt helped Lila from the wagon, noting how she dressed with careful precision, her best dark dress, mended where the river had torn it, hair pinned severe. She looked like what she was, a respectable widow seeking justice. Only Matt could see the tremor in her hands. Steady, he murmured. Almost there. I know. She straightened her spine. I'm ready. The crowd parted for them, whispers following in their wake. Matt caught fragments, saved her from the river, stood against 10 men. About time someone stopped Voss. At the defendant's table, Carter Voss sat shackled, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face gaunt. The empire he'd built on threats and paper was crumbling, and it showed in every line of his body. Beside him, his lawyer from Cheyenne shuffled papers with the air of a man fighting a lost cause. All rise. Acting Sheriff Avery called, young voice cracking slightly. The Honorable Judge Merrick presiding. The judge took his place behind a simple table someone had dragged from inside. Despite the informal setting, his presence commanded respect. This is a preliminary hearing to determine if sufficient evidence exists to bind Mr. Carter Voss over for trial on charges of fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and murder. His voice carried clear across the crowd. Mrs. Hart, please take the witness chair. Lila moved with quiet grace to the wooden chair set beside the judge's table. In the morning light, the fading bruise on her cheek was still visible, mute testimony to violence done. State your name for the record. Lila Catherine Hart.
Mrs. Hart, tell us about your late husband's dealings with Mr. Voss.
Lila's testimony came clear and precise. The desperate winter of '73. The loan that seemed salvation. The terms that shifted like smoke when Bill tried to pin them down. The payments made, recorded, then mysteriously lost from Voss's books. My husband kept every receipt, she said, producing the water-stained papers from her bag. Every payment, every interaction, he knew something was wrong. Objection. Voss's lawyer called. Those documents could be forged. They could be. Judge Merrick agreed mildly. That's why we have this. Deputy Avery brought forward a ledger, thick and official-looking. Matt recognized it Voss's private accounts. Seized during the arrest. Mr. Voss kept excellent records. The judge continued. Too excellent. Perhaps every manipulation, every adjusted payment, every convenient error, all in his own hand. A ripple went through the crowd. Voss half rose from his seat before his lawyer pulled him down. Mrs. Hart, the judge said, tell us about the night your husband died. The crowd went silent. This was what they'd come for, the heart of the darkness. Lila's voice stayed steady, though Matt saw her fingers whiten where they gripped each other. April 15th, Bill had gone to the barn to check a sick calf. When he didn't come back for supper, I went looking. She paused, gathering strength. Matt wanted to go to her, but knew she needed to do this alone. I found him hanging from the main beam. The sheriff said, her voice caught. Sheriff Dugan said it was suicide, that Bill couldn't face his debts, but I knew better. How did you know? Bill's hands were soft. No rope burns from climbing to tie the noose. His feet were flat on the ground. Someone had stood him on a bucket and kicked it away. And the night before, he'd told me about the mineral survey. Said he was going to confront Voss with it. Demand fair terms. Hearsay, the lawyer objected. Perhaps, Judge Merrick said, but we also have this. Another ledger appeared. This one Matt hadn't seen before. Sheriff Dugan kept records too, payments received for special services. Dates matching suspiciously with various accidents and misfortunes among Mr. Voss's debtors. The judge's voice hardened. Including an entry for April 15th. The crowd erupted. Dugan, seated in shackles near Voss, had gone white as paper. That don't prove nothing, Voss shouted, forgetting dignity. You can't. Sit down, Mr. Voss. The judge's voice cut like a blade. You'll have your turn. The testimony continued. Other witnesses came forward, Sarah Walsh telling of threats made to her family, Nora Pike describing attempts to force her from her boarding house, the widow Martinez, trembling but determined, speaking of her husband's convenient accident after refusing to sell. Through it all, Matt watched the crowd, saw faces shift from skepticism to anger, from doubt to certainty. These were people who'd lived under Voss's shadow for years, afraid to speak. Now, in the morning light with federal marshals standing guard, they found their voices. Mr. Cole, the judge called finally, please take the chair. Matt hadn't expected to testify, but he went. The chair still held warmth from the previous witness. You pulled Mrs. Hart from the river? Yes, sir. And later defended her against armed men. They didn't give me much choice. Tell us about the night Mrs. Hart stayed in your cabin. The night she asked that question, will you stay if I undress? A murmur ran through the crowd. Lila's face flamed, but she held her chin high. Matt met her eyes across the space. She was hurt, scared, and used to men demanding payment for basic kindness. She offered what she thought I wanted because that's what the world had taught her to expect. And your response? I turned my back, told her to get some sleep, that no one was asking for payment. He let his voice carry to the crowd. Because that's what decent men do. They help because it's right, not because they expect reward. The defense might argue this shows questionable moral character. The defense can go to hell. The words came out flat and hard. Pardon my language, Judge, but any man who'd take advantage of a desperate woman isn't worth the powder to blow him up. Mrs. Hart's character isn't in question here. The character of men who drive her to such desperation is... Silence stretched. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, came the sound of clapping. One person, then another, until the porch thundered with applause. Judge Merrick let it run its course before calling order. Mr. Voss, do you wish to speak in your defense? Voss stood slowly. For a moment, the old arrogance flickered. Then it died, leaving only a hollow man grasping at shadows. They owed me money, he said. I was within my rights. To adjust ledgers to conspire with law enforcement to commit murder. You can't prove. I have your own records. Sheriff Dugan's confession, which he provided this morning in exchange for consideration, and the testimony of a dozen witnesses. The judge's voice was implacable. I have more than enough. The crowd held its breath. Carter Voss, I bind you over for trial on all charges. Given the nature of the crimes and risk of flight, you'll be held without bail. He turned to the crowd. Furthermore, I'm appointing a special prosecutor to review all property transfers conducted by Mr. Voss in the past 5 years. Any found to be fraudulent will be reversed. The crowd erupted again, this time in celebration. Matt saw tears on faces that had been hard with fear moments before. Court is adjourned. In the chaos that followed, Matt found Lila surrounded by well-wishers. Sarah Walsh hugged her, tears streaming. Nora Pike patted her shoulder with gruff approval. Others who'd been silent for years came forward with their own stories, their gratitude. It's over, someone said. It's finally over. But Matt, watching Lila's face, knew better. The trial would be months away, the healing longer still. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back Bill Hart or undo years of fear. Later, after the crowd dispersed and statements were finalized, Matt found Lila sitting on the steps of the town hall. The sun was high, warming the wood, and she'd unpinned her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders. How do you feel? He asked, settling beside her. Empty, full. I don't know. She laughed, short and shaky. I thought I'd feel different, triumphant, maybe, but mostly I just feel tired. That's normal. Battle's over. Body finally lets down. Is it over? This part is, rest is just living. She turned to him, those amber eyes searching. What happens now to us? I mean, this thing between us, it started in crisis. What if without that? Matt cut her off with a kiss. Gentle this time. Nothing like the desperate collision after he'd been wounded. When they parted, he kept his forehead against hers. What happens now is we fix those windows, plant a garden, build a chicken coop that won't wash away, make coffee so bad you complain every morning. He pulled back to see her face. We live, Lila, one day at a time, together, if you'll have me. You still want that even with all of Red Bluff watching, knowing what they'll say. Let me show you something. He stood, then helped her up. There, in the middle of Main Street, with half the town potentially watching from windows and doorways. Matt Cole took Lila Hart in his arms and kissed her properly. No hiding, no shame, just a man choosing a woman in full light of day. When they parted, Lila was breathless and laughing. Matthew Cole, what will people say? The truth, for once, that a good man loves a good woman and isn't ashamed to show it. Love. The word came soft, wondering. What else would you call it? I'd fight a dozen Vosses for you. Hell, I'd drink your coffee every morning for the rest of my life. And that's saying something. She laughed again, bright and real. My coffee's not that bad. It's terrible, but you make excellent cornbread, so I figure it balances out. They walked to the wagon together, her hand in his, neither caring who saw. As Matt helped her up, Lila said, "I want to stop somewhere before we go home." "Name it."
"The cemetery. I need to tell Bill it's done, that he can rest now."
They drove in comfortable silence to the small graveyard on the hill overlooking town, while Lila stood at her husband's grave, speaking words too quiet for Matt to hear. He waited by the wagon, understanding this moment wasn't his to share. When she returned, her eyes were wet but clear. "Thank you."
"For what?"
"For knowing when to stand with me and when to stand apart. For seeing all of me, widow, woman, survivor, and not asking me to be less than all of it." "You're welcome." As they drove toward home, and it was home now, "Truly," Lila asked, "what will you tell people when they ask how we met?" "The truth, that I pulled you from a river, and you pulled me from myself." That's almost poetry. Matthew Cole.
"Must be your influence."
The sun was warm on their faces. The sky endless blue above the mountains. Behind them, Red Bluff was already changing. People walked straighter, spoke louder, looked each other in the eye. Justice, it seemed, was contagious. And ahead, their cabin waited, scarred but standing, ready for new windows and new beginnings. "Matt," Lila said as they turned up the familiar path. "Yeah, I love you too," in case that wasn't clear. He grinned, young as a boy for just that moment. "It was clear, but I don't mind hearing it said." "Good, because I plan on saying it every morning, right after I complain about your coffee." "My coffee, woman. You're the one who—" Their laughter echoed across the valley, bright as hope, strong as promises kept, endless as the sky above Wyoming territory, where two souls had found each other in the most unlikely way and chosen to stay found. The first winter came hard to their small house by Sweetwater Creek. Matt had worked through the fall to make it ready, new shingles on the roof, chinking between the logs, a proper stone chimney that drew clean. But December brought snow that piled to the windows and wind that found every weakness in their defenses. "We should have built further from the creek," Lila said one morning, breath misting as she stoked the fire. Ice had formed on the inside of the windows, delicate ferns of frost that caught the early light. "Spring flooding," Matt reminded her, bringing in an armload of wood. "Better to haul water in winter than rebuild in spring." Always practical. But she smiled when she said it, the expression warming her face more than the fire warmed the room. They'd married in October. A simple ceremony in Nora Pike's parlor with Deputy, now Sheriff Tom Avery, and Sarah Walsh as witnesses. No white dress or fancy reception, just plain words plainly spoken and meant to the bone. The whole town had turned out afterward, bringing food and good wishes to the couple who'd shown them what courage looked like. Now, in the deep cold of January, they were learning the harder truths of building a life together. The work was endless: water to haul, wood to split, animals to tend. They'd started small, 6 chickens, 2 milk cows, and a pair of draft horses bought with the money from selling the Hart farm.
"I can't go back there,"
Lila had said when the deed was returned to her free and clear.
"Too many ghosts."
So they'd sold it to the Olson family, who'd lost their own place to Voss's schemes. The money let them improve their creekside land, adding a barn and fencing pastures for the cattle they planned to buy come spring. But the best addition wasn't built of wood or stone. "Someone's coming," Matt called from the barn one February morning. A wagon struggled up the snow-packed trail, Sarah Walsh at the reins with her baby bundled beside her. Lila flew out without her coat, helping Sarah down.
"What's wrong? Is Hope sick?"
"Not sick." Sarah's face glowed despite the cold. "But Martha Hendricks is in labor, and the doctor's drunk again. She's asking for you." It had started small, Lila helping at births when the doctor couldn't or wouldn't come, but word spread as word does in small towns. The woman who'd stood up to Carter Voss, who'd pulled babies into the world with steady hands and steadier nerves, became someone people turned to. "I'll get my bag," Lila said, already moving. I'll drive you, Matt offered.
No.
Lila paused at the door.
Stay. Someone needs to keep the fires going. I might be gone all night.
He caught her hand as she passed. Be careful. Roads are icy. Always am. She kissed him quick. Keep dinner warm. And Matt, there's a book in my sewing basket. Might want to have a look. She was gone before he could ask what she meant. Curious. He found the basket, lifted the fabric she'd been working on. Beneath was a slim volume, Medical Receipts for Midwives and Healers. A note was tucked inside. Lila's careful script. Found this in Cheyenne. Thought I might study it proper. What do you think? Matt smiled, tracing the words with one finger. What he thought was that his wife would make a fine healer, licensed or not. The frontier needed people who could do what was needed, not just what was allowed. That night, while Lila helped Martha Hendricks bring new life into the world, Matt sat by their fire and read the medical book cover to cover. When she came home near dawn, exhausted but triumphant, he had coffee waiting and questions ready. Boy or girl?
Girl, they're calling her Grace.
Lila collapsed in the chair, accepting the coffee gratefully. Martha had a hard time, but they're both well. You did good.
I did what I could.
She studied him over the cup's rim. You read the book.
I did. You should study it, all of it, whatever you want to learn.
People will talk. A woman playing at doctor. People already talk. Differences. Now they talk about who to call when babies come or fever strikes. He knelt beside her chair. You have a gift. Lila, be ashamed to waste it on worrying what folks might say. She set down the cup, framed his face with her hands. How did I get so lucky? Funny, I ask myself the same thing. Spring came late but sweet, creeks running high with snowmelt, pastures greening overnight. They bought cattle from a rancher heading back east. 20 head of longhorns tough enough to survive Wyoming winters. The garden went in vegetables, herbs Lila wanted for medicines, flowers because beauty mattered too. Going to town, Matt announced one morning in May. Need supplies. I'll come. Sarah asked me to look at Hope's rash. Town had changed since Voss's arrest. His stores had been sold to honest merchants, his properties distributed to those he'd cheated. The boarding house thrived under Nora's management, and Sheriff Avery had brought in 2 new deputies who actually upheld the law. They were loading supplies when Avery himself approached, letter in hand. Matt, this came for you, from Judge Merrick. Matt opened it, aware of Lila reading over his shoulder. Dear Mr. Cole, he read aloud. You may be interested to know that Carter Voss was convicted on all charges. He will spend the remainder of his days in federal prison. Sheriff Dugan received 10 years. Justice, while slow, has been served. Additionally, I'm writing to inform you that the territorial government is establishing a new position, Rural Medical Officer, to serve the scattered communities that lack doctors. While formal medical training is preferred, practical experience and demonstrated competence will be considered. I thought Mrs. Cole might be interested. If she wishes to apply, I would be honored to provide a recommendation. The frontier needs healers more than it needs conventions. Yours in service, Judge Andrew Merrick. Lila's hand found Matt's, squeezing tight.
Is he serious?
Seems to be. Question is, are you? She thought about it as they drove home, past the cemetery where Bill Hart lay at peace, past the river that had brought them together, past the scattered homesteads where she'd delivered babies and tended sick children.
Yes,
she said finally.
I'm serious.
The application process took months, but by fall, Lila Hart Cole was officially appointed Rural Medical Officer for the district. The pay was minimal, the hours unpredictable, but the satisfaction on her face when she pinned on the badge was worth more than gold. One evening in November, first snow falling soft outside, they sat by their fire in the house they'd built together. Lila was studying a new medical text while Matt worked on harness repairs. The domesticity of it, the quiet companionship, the shared purpose still caught him sometimes like a fist around his heart. "Regrets?" Lila asked, not looking up from her book. "About what?" "This life, it's not what you planned when you came west. Solitude. You said peace and quiet." Matt set aside the harness, crossed to where she sat. "Plans change."
That's not an answer. If you ask me to give this up, the house, the work, the whole life we've built, and go back to my cabin by the river, just me and silence and coffee so bad even I couldn't drink it,
You know what I'd say. She marked her place, looked up at him.
What?
"I'd say no, not for all the solitude in Wyoming, not for anything." He pulled her to her feet, into his arms. "You asked me once if I'd stay if you undressed. Remember?" Color rose in her cheeks.
I remember. I stayed then. I'll stay always. Dressed, undressed, covered in garden mud or birthing blood or wearing that badge you're so proud of. This is my peace. Lila, you are my quiet place." She kissed him then, soft and sure, tasting of the peppermint tea she favored in the evenings. When they parted, she was smiling. "Want to know a secret?" "Always." "That first night, when you turned your back, part of me was relieved, but part of me was disappointed too." She laughed at his expression. "Oh, don't look so shocked. I'm allowed to want my husband, aren't I?" "Are you wanting now?" "Matthew Cole, I'm always wanting when it comes to you." Later, in the warmth of their bed while snow whispered against the windows, Lila traced lazy patterns on Matt's chest. "We should think about expanding the house come spring." "Getting tired of close quarters?" "No, but we might need more room soon." Something in her tone made him prop up on an elbow. "Lila?" She took his hand, placed it on her still flat belly. "Late summer. I think maybe early fall." The joy that flooded through him was physical, overwhelming. "You're sure?" "Sure as a woman can be who's delivered dozens of babies." She grinned. "Though I admit, it's different being on this side of things." They lay together in the darkness, planning in the way of expectant parents everywhere, names and necessities, hopes and fears all tangled together. "Boy or girl?" Matt asked. "Doesn't matter, long as they have your sense of honor and my good sense about coffee." "Your coffee is terrible, woman." "Your standards are too high, man." They bickered gently, laughing, while outside the snow fell and the creek sang its endless song. In the barn, cattle lowed. From the chicken coop came sleepy clucks, all the sounds of a life built from courage and choice, love and labor. The next morning, Matt woke to find Lila at the window, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered valley rose and gold. "What are you thinking?" he asked, joining her. "About that night in the river, how I thought I was dying, how you pulled me out." She leaned into him. "I used to carry that old life like a weight, Bill, the fear, all of it, but somewhere along the way, I let it go." "When?" She turned in his arms, smiled up at him. "The day I threw that key in the creek. Remember the wooden key to the seed storage? I'd kept it to run, always ready to run. But that day I knew I wasn't running anymore. I was home." "We both are." They stood together, watching the world wake up, their breath misting in the cold air. Soon there would be chores animals to feed, patience for Lila to see, fences for Matt to mend. But for now, in the quiet of dawn, they simply held each other and marveled at the life they'd built from the ashes of old pain. The house by the creek stood strong against the winter, smoke rising from the chimney like a prayer of gratitude. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way continued the daily work of choosing each other again. And in the summer, when their child was born a daughter, they named Faith the circle would widen but never break. Because some things, once truly built,
endure. Some loves, once truly chosen, last. Thank you, friends, for listening to this tale of love, justice, and redemption in the Old West. I'd love to hear where you're listening from, whether it's a busy city or a quiet countryside, your own piece of the frontier or somewhere across the seas. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to Wild West Night for more tales of courage and hope from America's legendary past. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these stories of the human spirit. Until next time, keep riding towards your own horizons. Happy trails.